Let's begin. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: rook takes pawn, rook takes pawn, check, rook takes pawn, queen takes pawn, queen takes bishop, queen takes pawn. Here are checks in puzzle position. Rook takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is: queen takes bishop, rook to f7, rook takes pawn, check, king to g8, queen to g5. One more. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes rook, queen takes pawn, check, queen takes pawn. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen to d5, check, queen to a8, check, queen to e6, check, queen to g6, check, queen takes pawn, check. The answer is: queen to a8, check, king to g7, knight to f5, check, king to g6, knight takes rook, check, rook takes knight, rook takes rook. Next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: knight takes rook. There are no checks in this position. Solution to the puzzle is: knight takes rook, rook takes knight, check, king to h2. Let us go to the next puzzle. The threats are: queen takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, bishop takes bishop, bishop takes pawn, bishop takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is: bishop takes bishop, knight takes bishop, queen takes knight. Next, here are the threats. Rook takes pawn, rook takes pawn. The checks are: rook to g6, check, rook to d5, check, h4, check. The puzzle is solved using: king to g3, h5, h4, checkmate. Let's continue. Here are threats in puzzle position. Rook takes bishop, queen takes bishop, knight takes bishop. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using: knight takes bishop, knight takes knight, rook takes knight. Let's continue. Threats in puzzle position are: there are no threats in this position. Checks in this position are: rook to f6, check, queen to e3, check, queen to g5, check, queen to g6, check, queen to g7, check, queen to c1, check. The answer is: queen to g7, check, king to h5, rook to f6, queen takes rook, queen takes queen. Next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: knight takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, queen takes pawn, queen takes knight, queen takes bishop, bishop takes knight. There are no checks in this position. Solution to the puzzle is: bishop takes knight, bishop to h2, check, bishop takes bishop. Another one. The threats are: rook takes pawn, rook takes rook. Here are the checks. Rook to e3, check. Answer to this puzzle is: rook takes rook, king takes rook, king to e6, king to d4, king to f5. Next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn, check, queen takes pawn, check, queen takes rook. Checks in puzzle position are: queen takes pawn, check, queen to g7, check, queen to f7, check, queen takes pawn, check, queen to e8, check, queen to d8, check, queen to c8, check, rook to f7, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook to f7, check, king to d6, queen to g3, check, e5, queen takes pawn, checkmate. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: rook takes pawn, queen takes pawn, check. The checks are: queen takes pawn, check. The answer is: queen takes pawn, check, king to h1, rook to g8, queen takes rook, rook takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: knight takes bishop, check, knight takes pawn, bishop takes bishop, queen takes queen, rook takes knight. Checks in this position are: knight takes bishop, check, knight to h6, check. The answer is: knight takes bishop, check, queen takes knight, bishop takes queen. Next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: queen takes bishop, check. The checks are: queen to f2, check, queen takes bishop, check, Queen to b6, check. Knight to f3, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Knight to g4. Bishop to b5, check. c6. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are the threats. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes pawn. The checks are: queen takes rook, check. Queen to f6, check. Queen to e5, check. Knight to g6, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen to f6, check. Bishop to g7. Knight to g6, check. Pawn takes knight. Queen to h4, check. Bishop to h6. Queen takes bishop, checkmate. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Rook takes rook, check. Rook takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. Checks in this position are: rook to e8, check. Rook takes rook, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen to b4, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook takes rook, check. Pawn takes rook. King takes bishop. Let's see the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook to a8. Bishop to d6. a7. Rook takes pawn. Rook to e8, check. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in this position are: pawn takes knight. Queen takes pawn, check. Rook takes pawn. Checks in this position are: queen takes pawn, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen to b5. Rook takes pawn. b4. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are the threats. There are no threats in this position. The checks are: rook to f8, check. Rook to e7, check. Queen to e6, check. Queen to e7, check. Queen to f3, check. Queen to h5, check. Solution to the puzzle is: queen to h5, check. g6. Queen takes pawn, check. King takes rook. Queen takes queen. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: king takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The answer is: king to f6. g4. Queen takes pawn, check. King to h8. Knight to e5. Bishop to g7, check. King to f7. Next, threats in this position are: knight takes pawn. Bishop takes knight. Bishop takes pawn. Here are checks in puzzle position. Bishop to d5, check. The answer is: bishop takes knight. Pawn takes bishop. Knight to e6. Rook to e8. Knight takes rook. Another puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: bishop takes pawn. Rook takes pawn, check. Rook takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are: rook takes pawn, check. The answer is: rook to g8. f4. Bishop takes pawn. Next, threats in puzzle position are: knight takes knight. Knight takes pawn. Rook takes knight, check. The checks are: rook takes knight, check. Answer to this puzzle is: rook takes knight, check. Rook to f8. Rook takes rook, check. King takes rook. Knight takes knight. Next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. King to f6. King to e8. King to e6. b5. a5. Another one. Here are the threats. Queen takes bishop. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes pawn, check. The checks are: rook to d1, check. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is: queen takes rook, check. King to b2. Rook to d5. f4. Rook takes bishop. Next puzzle. Threats in this position are: rook takes bishop, check. Checks in this position are: rook takes bishop, check. Answer to this puzzle is: rook takes bishop, check. King to f2. Rook takes rook. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.